Hello there and welcome to this video, and today I'm going to be talking about not only one of the greatest prog bands of all time but also one of the greatest fusion bands of all time, and this is part one of my video about the band Gong, which were a sort of English stroke French progressive rock band that were around in the 70s. They've carried on right up until this day. They're still going, but I'm going to be in this video looking at the very famous Flying Teapot Trilogy of albums, which I regard as three of the greatest progressive rock albums of all time. So say for example you've got into Yes and your ELP and you're into Genesis and you're into your like Lamb Lies Down on Broadway and you're close to the edge and you think you've really, you know, taken it as far out as you possibly can in terms of bizarre progness and epicness. Well, if you have and you want to go a little bit further out and try something a lot stranger and weirder, I would suggest checking out the Flying Teapot Trilogy of albums by Gong, which came out in 1973, 74, 75 I think. I think it roughly runs over those few years. It's three separate albums, but they're all tied together with this story. Right, so Gong is a band that was created by an absolute genius called David Allen. David Allen was a member of Soft Machine. He would never recorded on the albums, but he was a founder member. I think he got stranded in France and couldn't get back to England, so he had to leave Soft Machine at that time, and so he formed another band called Gong. The first few albums by Gong are actually quite strange, but I think around about 1971, 1972 he records an album called Camembert Electric, and that's a fantastic album, and there's a track on there called You Can't Kill Me, and the sound of that really preempts the sound he's going to create on these three albums. So, three albums, here they are. They come out one after the other. They tell a story. How much in this video am I going to get into the story? Not much. It's a bizarre story about an alien coming to Earth and basically transforming the minds of people on Earth. The story runs through. It's completely linear. You know, you can follow the story if you want. You know, there's a lot of imagery that goes around this, but also the music is absolutely fantastic. Gong have almost their own sound, which is very proggy but very quirky and twee, but also very heavy at times, very psychedelic with elements of jazz fusion. Also there's elements of sort of esoteric mythology in there. They really are quite, in terms of ideas about the environment and Gaia and all those things that became very trendy in the 80s and 90s, Gong were there first. There's a lot of that sort of imagery on, you know, sort of Mother Earth and sort of esoteric ideas of the environment, you know. They are a very drug-related band. I know a lot of people who love them is because it's one of those bands that people like to get high to and listen to, and there's a lot of stuff on there that really does sound very strange if you're in that sort of state. Lots of little voices and sounds and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, if you're a prog fan, if that sounds great, I'm going to talk the way through the albums on this video, and hopefully if you don't know these albums you will run out and check them out because they're absolute masterpieces, prog masterpieces. So the first one that comes out is this one. Gong, Radio Gnome Invisible Part 1, The Flying Teapot. There we go. I've got the album there. There's the cover. There's the back. I'm going to show you inside. Right, you can see that there. And it tells, it's sort of, if you can see, it starts telling the story here. You know, Radio Gnome is a kind of telepathic pirate radio which transmits from a flying teapot coming from the planet Gong. Now, what's this flying teapot? You may not know this, but in English philosophy, there was a proposition that I think was put forth by Bertrand Russell, and it was a sort of thing, I think it sort of goes like, you know, we can say there's a flying teapot travelling around the Earth, but how do we prove it exists? It was an argument about proof, empirical proof. It's quite a famous argument, and I think David Allen is alluding to that flying teapot as though it's a real thing. So what do we have on this album? Well, it's Slightly different to the other two because the lineup hasn't quite established itself. We haven't got Pierre Morlon on Gong on drums, who is an incredible drummer that really shifts Gong to another level. There's some fantastic drumming on here, but it's on a different point. And also Steve Hillage is in the band at this point, but he's not doing much. But those two, who's a guitarist, you know, and Hillage and Pierre Morlon really do create the sound of the band. But despite that, this is still an utter masterpiece. And it sort of sits stylistically between the next two albums. This contains some quite short, I'm not going to say poppy songs, but very catchy little songs, interspersed with a couple of monster jams. There's a jam on here, Flying Teapot, which is 12 minutes and 30 seconds. And it's absolutely incredible. It's one of the great psychedelic moments in music history. But yeah, this came out in... It's very hard to read this album and get any details off it because everything is like... There's no... The lineup is not the names of the people. They've all got pseudonyms. But this album came out in 1973. And that's the first of the trilogy. Okay? It's followed up with an album which is equally good. All these three albums are different, but they're all brilliant. I could not say one is better than the other. But it's followed up by this album, Angel's Egg. All right. And again, you can see the story carrying on there. And it's got these sort of little cartoons. It's sort of so you can follow what's going on. Musically, it's changed a little bit because we now have Pierre Morlon on drums, and he really just comes in with some of the greatest progressive rock drumming ever, as does Steve Hillage with his incredible guitar playing. But you've also got Didier Malherbe, he's on the first album playing saxophone and flute, and that gives it a certain sound. And also you got Gilly Smith, and what Gilly Smith does is she does this whooping singing. This is on all the albums, but it really comes to the fore on here even more. The thing about this album, where it's different to the first album, it opens up with a track called Other Side of the Sky, which is 8 minutes long, and that's one of these sort of psychedelic jams. But after that, the tunes are all very short. Soul to the Highest Buddha, 3 minutes. Castle in the Clouds, 1 minute 15. You know, on side 2, Flute Side, 2 minute 40, Oily Way, 3 minute 35. This is, you know, once you get that past that first track, it's a series of very concise, small little tracks, actually quite catchy. If we were going to say which one's the sort of most commercial, it would probably be this album. But the music is still so far out on here that it's even probably further out than the first album. One of my favourite albums, and one of my favourite prog drumming experiences. This is just a really incredible album. You know, as you can see, I cannot get across with these three albums how good they are. And if you're a prog fan and you haven't heard them, go and get the three of them now and start listening. Right? The last album, I think this album. When did this come out? It's got to be. It could well be 73 as well. It's hard to see details, and I'm not too sure, to be honest. Let's have a look at the vinyl, shall we, and see what it says. So this is saying 1973 too. So that came out. So yeah, the next one's 1974. So these albums are made over 2 years. So the last album in the trilogy is You, right? And again, this is an utter masterpiece. When I was a kid, this was my favourite one. Was the third one, but I think that was because the three albums are sequential. They haven't just been chunked together. This is a definite concept that runs over three albums. And the albums start to get heavier and heavier and reach to a climax. And this album is so climactic and heavy. And this one is basically just... there's three tracks on each side, but it all flows together. So it's almost like one huge, massive epic. And God, are there some moments on here. You know, just the way side one opens up, with these drones, and the drones slowly build and build, and then suddenly Pierre Morlon kicks in with this drum beat, and it's just cascading all around the place, and the track just lifts up and up and up and up, and just when you sort of can't take it anymore, you just bang, and all you can hear are birds singing. You think, where the hell am I? And then the whole track kicks back in, utterly incredible. Side 2 has got the sort of closest to a pop song, which is called Perfect Mystery. Which has the famous cops at the door, you know. So if you are smoking illegal substances while listening to this, it freaks you out perhaps because they're going, cops at the door. No, there's no cops at the door. And you hear all this. I think at one point, it almost sounds like someone's banging on the wall. Really incredible as the track gets to the climax, which is You Never Blow Your Trip to Forever, where you almost hear all the other tracks sort of spinning back in, you know. So, yeah, this is the final one. I'll go through these again. So, there you hear the first one, Flying Teapot, followed by Angel's Egg, and then finished off by You. Okay, absolutely incredible. If you get these albums and you love them, as I did, and you want to check out some more that sounds a little bit like that, I would go for perhaps Camembert Electric next, and then there's a live album, Gong Against Morns, which is fantastic. You can get into that. And there's a follow-up album after David Allen left, which I've got here behind me, called Shamal. That's also a great album. But none of them are like the Flying Teapot Trilogy. So, yeah, absolutely incredible prog. Trippy, mad. You'll never hear anything so mad and crazy in your whole life as this stuff. So, yeah, check it out. You know, and if you like these little videos, you like these little heads up about certain albums, of course, like and subscribe, but more importantly, put a comment in there. We're getting so many comments. I'm getting so many suggestions of other albums I need to check out myself, which is absolutely fantastic. And again, thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon. Thanks.